Welcome to the Business of Allied Health series. It's just supported by CliniScribe, which I founded. I have Jonathan Moody here. So I've known this fella for a very long time now. And what I thought I was approaching him as a business has actually changed a lot since what it was from a few pivots, a few challenges he's had. But he's, stood the test of times from a humble beginning to where he is at now.
Thank you, Barry. Thanks for having me on. And that's very kind words, mate. It certainly has been a journey. And I remember when we first met at a cafe down south of Melbourne, down there, when I was first getting into some tech, and you were the guy at the PA that was the trusted confidant for all things tech, mate. And it's been lovely to keep in touch with you over the years.
Yep, so I forgot to introduce. He's from Physio Inc. with an INQ. Yeah, so how did you start? What like you're a founder, obviously.
Yeah, like the story's not that is not that uncommon. I got out of uni, I'd read 1,000 business books. It's about 2004. I was working for Paul Wright, who's an incredible business leader and business coach, and good friend. Working for Paul for a couple of years, he effectively inspired me to, be able to go out on my own. I had my partner and fiance at the time, Irene. Her parents are living out in Western Sydney. We went down to buy some stuff from the local grocery store, and we ended up walking out with a lease on from one of the medical centers. And so we started Physio Inq just out of a medical center, which is, a mistake, but I think at the time, felt like the right thing. It was a mistake in hindsight. Like working out of a medical center, it's very insular. It's hard to get work from outside that medical center because people, doctors don't like referring as much to inside a medical center. But we did pretty well. We ended up opening up a clinic in Glenmore Park in a house. We got one in St. Clair, and we built quite organically off the mantra of individualized care, which, back in the early 2000s, a hell of a lot of clinics were double, triple, quadruple treating patients at the time, heavy use of machines. And we came in with a very hands-on and exercise focus. Grew to 6 clinics pretty quickly. Marriage kind of broke down at the same time as hitting our first hurdle in business, where we had scaled a little bit too quickly. We were in, some financial issues, and we had to really think about how to, get through that in terms of we've been building up a lot of debt through, acquiring equipment, getting new sites. Profitable growth is very, very difficult to do in physio if you don't have deep pockets and you're able to fund your growth through alternative means, then you need a lot of patience in order to be able to profitably grow. So we probably grew a little bit too quickly, and we got into a bit of turmoil, and really had to rethink the models that we did going forward. And so we pivoted into franchise operations, where we sold off our best clinics to individuals within inside our network, and held on to our more struggling practices, and built our struggling practices up, and completely reworked how we, worked the business in order to, continue to grow. And my goal was always to build a workplace that allied health professionals can thrive. And we did through that. I also saw an opportunity in home care. Back in about 2015, we started doing aged care in home allied health. And then the NDIS kind of came along in 2017. And we had one of our receptionists was really strong advocate of disability. And so we went down the disability path really early in the NDIS. And fast forward to now, our franchise network, went quite well, got to 20 odd practices. But our identity and our alignment with our clinics versus our mobile operations was really, really difficult for both our customers as well as our employees. And so we made the challenging decision to, let all of our franchisees kind of go independent and, leave the network, which was something that, took a long, long time to make a decision on. And but we did that, and, empowered them to go it alone, gave them the tools and resources that they needed to go independently. And now we're just really focusing on doing great in-home care. But, with the Iran war raging, with the NDIS doing, cuts to fuel and to travel times, it has had its, big hurdles and barriers. And, we're always looking at ways that we can peek around the corner and see further into the future. But it's been a interesting journey. We've tried a few different models, and, here we are with, over 400 clinicians across physio, EP, occupational therapy and speech pathology across the country. Everyone's employees. We don't work a contract model. And, it's a school of hard knocks. Over the years, it cost me my marriage. It's, cost me a lot of money trying to grow. It's been a fascinating time.
Yeah, just on that note, was there any benefits to co-founding a company with your wife, who's also a physio?
Yeah, look, the obvious benefits early on were, was labor, right? Like, when you're co-founding anything, you got to put a lot of sweat equity in. And when you're both, in it for the same reason, that makes a lot of sense. You take work home with you every night. You take work home with you on the weekends. And whether or not, your relationship is strong enough to, you know, work through all of that is dependent and it's highly individualized. In hindsight, probably wouldn't recommend it for me because, I do like to leave work be home outside of those hours. I very much like to switch off and not have that get pulled through. So that is one of the big downsides to, putting the sweat equity in with your partner.
And the franchising. So I know Jason Smith at Back in Motion did that quite well
Yeah.
and sold out for a large sum.
The franchising game in growing it when we were trying to be frank, I'd take my hat off to Jace being able to get to the numbers of clinics that he got to. For us, there were so many business coaching and business support was a big part of what we're doing as a franchisor. And there are so many amazing business coaches, on the market and increasingly so, over the years. The Mastery guys, Paul Wright, and on and on. There's so many good products out there. And with the advent of social media, Instagram, a lot of online coaches, we found that trying to bring people into a different brand that is not their brand, it's not their identity, was quite a challenge. For the amount of money that we were charging in terms of the franchise fees was very minimal compared to what we were providing. But for owners being able to feel as though they have their own identity, they can build up their own IP, they can build up their own business that's theirs for selling. All of that information is a lot more available now than it was 20 years ago when I first started. And so, social media has been an amazing thing to empower business owners to take the lead, do the research, to be able to get the skills, Gary V back in the day teaching you how to do social media. Like there are so many amazing, resources available that for us, it made it harder to scale than what we thought it was. And again, as I said, we got into the, 20 odd practices. We're going quite well, but it was a lot more difficult to attract individuals than what we had thought. And so, as I said, hats off to businesses that have been able to do it, but we found it a real grind.
Right. And how do you hold the glue together these days with 400 practitioners? Like what is the secret there? How did you go
Yeah,
from
the pizza methodology. It's just building up systems and processes that are confined within 5 human beings. So it's, a team leader has oversight over 5 therapists. A higher level manager has oversight over 5 team leaders. And so you set really, really strong training capabilities in place, make sure that they've got enough time during the week to have those discussions on how they're performing, whether or not they need some support. But you're just building small teams and you rinse and repeating those processes, but you're investing as much time as you can into building up the managers to be great at supporting people. And that's how you can scale it. You got to have a lot of trust. You got to have a lot of trust in your people. We've got to have a lot of trust in your processes, document everything, train relentlessly, have great onboarding systems. That's effectively how you get there. But there's make a lot of errors along the way. And, when you get to 400 odd people, if you made an error, it gets multiplied a hell of a lot of times rather than just 5 times, right?
Absolutely, it's compound.
That's it.
Who holds you accountable these days? Do
Yeah,
you have a
board.
coach or
I've got a
board?
board.
Yep,
Yeah, I
yep.
got a board.
Yeah, nice.
Over the years, that's kind of taken on different iterations. We had brought in an advisory board about 6 years ago. We've moved into a formal board as of 18 months ago, and that formal board is, got very strong structure, strong governance. I have to write reports every month. My executives have to write reports into that. And so, and from that, I still get to get the advice behind the scenes from the board members. So from a, coaching standpoint, I've got a lot of consultants that I can reach out to at any point in time. I know where my blind spots are mostly. So yeah, it's about, where are my blind spots? Where are my gaps? Who are those people I know in my Refidex that I can lean on for, for filling those in? But yeah, the board structure is a great structure for us at our size that, is what is going to set us up for, strong succession planning in the future.
And what is your vision for the future? Are you going to grow it further? Are you going to keep it at 400?
Yeah, so the NDIS has been really good to us in terms of a vehicle for growth in allied health. Obviously it's on the nose politically, and it's quite sad because, they're just throwing everybody under the same umbrella of, frauds, over servicing, etc. And it's very, very much not true inside the, allied health service providers in the NDIS. They are, under servicing. If anything, the budgets are not nearly enough. There's only 10% of packages that go to allied health. So, what we want to achieve is, impact from be able to get an impact on legislative changes, get an impact on regulatory changes. We're not big enough to be able to do that at the moment. I still see us as, a small player in the market in terms of the impact that we want to make from a regulatory standpoint. So and Paddy, who works for me as in my executive, he always talks about what's the the photo op. What's the photo opportunity? How many people do you need before you have that impact? And I don't know what that number is, but the reason why I want the impact is so that we can protect the future of allied health professionals, so we can protect the future of exercise physiology from, at the moment they're under the lens of the NDIS in terms of are they going to be there long term? I want to help protect physiotherapists' earning potential. I want to help raise the bar on, how much we can charge with, government-led, programs. And so if I can get large enough, if we can provide enough data to the government, if we can provide enough evidence to show that what we're doing actually works in terms of providing a positive ROI for the government with regards to their programs, that's going to get me a seat at the table to be able to talk about how to get these legislative changes brought forward. Medicare rebates are, with the chronic disease management plan program, the enhanced primary care program, are not very good. DVAs, it's a paltry sum of money that you can charge for DVA in clinics. All of these programs are all, totally inadequate from an allied health perspective. And so we just really want to get impact. So what does that look like? I don't know. Maybe I'm 20% of the way there. Maybe it's 5 times our size,
Wow.
maybe it's 10 times our size, something like that. Because then the data will be, if we're smart and we can have almost open source, show the world what data we're collecting, what impact that's making on the health programs, then, you've got that weight of evidence behind you where you're actually, there's only one way that discussion, can follow. So yeah, I think maybe, we're a quarter of the way there, 10th of the way there, something like that. The vehicle that we've started to, embrace, we've become a support at home package manager as well. Now we're approved for support at home services. Most allied health businesses are brokers to support at home package managers, old school home care pack managers. We became approved in mid last year. We're really proud of that approval, and it's not for the Commonwealth, the CHSP, it's for the broad package management. And we want to use that vehicle to be able to partner with other allied health providers under what's called associated providers and broker business to other physios and OTs and speechies and exercise physiologists, because we're wanting to change the game in terms of reablement. So in aged care at the moment, about 10 to 15% of budgets are spent on allied health. And I find that absolutely astonishing that it's only 10 to 15%. Like if you're trying to keep people in the home for longer, you should be spending 50, 60, 70% of their budgets on allied health, right? Like that just makes sense. You've got to make them stronger. You've got to make their environments, got to improve their environments. You've got to make them, help them communicate, reduce cognitive decline, et cetera, et cetera. So by us being able to control that referral flow in those packages, work with the client to say, not what do you want, but what are you trying to achieve? We're going to be able to have a big reablement focus and get other associated providers in on that journey. We've been a broker of aged care services for many, many years. They work on price. They say I want a provider at this price. Whereas I want providers to operate at high quality. I want providers to operate at a reablement focus, which is premium care. And so we want to be an associated provider supporter that gets to charge, get premium partners in. And, if anybody's watching this, it's an allied healthcare provider,
Yeah,
watch your socials and hopefully you can, get on our associated provider list at some point.
fantastic. So, what do you mean by high quality? What's the definition to you of a high quality provider in your realm?
Yeah, so classically in home care packs, they would say we'll pay you $135 for a visit, and you're not going to be achieving anything of note for someone being able to go into the home and help them build a reablement program for that client. So it's everything from the way that they view the exercise delivery, how they set their home up, how they engage the family, the governance around incident management, the coordination across all of those services. Anybody can do a tick and flick with regards to a service and turn up, show that they turned up, and have a few arbitrary lines of information. But the quality provider that will provide insight into metrics for the client to show that their reablement is actually working, that will engage with different systems, that will be able to provide the data that we can use as evidence for legislators to get a greater seat at the table over time. So that's the quality that we're looking for, real outcomes, real results, not just a tick and flick service provision. Like the days of walking around with the cream bottle and just doing rub downs for pain management are gone. Like, that's gone. Supported homes has shown that they want to go a different way on it, and we really want to embrace it.
Yeah, I mean, when I first met you many years ago, I loved and appreciated your metrics driven type of leadership and decision making. I remember, I think you told me over coffee that you were really good at math or something like
That was
that.
my jam at school. Yeah,
I was like, your
like
jam? Yeah, I
maths and
still remember
physics,
that.
and yeah,
I don't think we've spoken about it for many years, but I remember that part. I'm like, it's going to be really interesting, right? Being
yeah.
in this setting like that. So I'm just wondering, I mean, we spoke about off the record around profit margins and things like that you expect and what you can do. What is the key metric you measure in your business that's most important
Yeah.
to you?
So the key metrics at the end of the day, it comes down, look, as healthcare providers, we need to make sure that we're delivering good service. Especially if, most of your people that are watching this will be from a clinic, making sure that your NPS score is absolutely bomber. You need people to be appreciating and enjoying and engaging with your service, and that they'll want to refer your service to someone else. So making sure that you're tracking NPS across all of your clinicians is absolutely vital. So that's, you build it from the service level up. Then, after that, are you documenting clinical outcomes? Because you'll want to get good clinical outcomes. You want to be able to, and by discharge, like, I was known as, nobody gets discharged. I think it's an erroneous way of thinking about care. You don't discharge your mechanic. Your mechanic's done, and you've got a regular review cycle to make sure your cars are up and running. And I think that people are starting to understand the benefit there, that it's not a one and done. You just don't get an injury treated and you're completed in most cases. Making sure that your clinical outcomes are documented really well. So those two elements are the objective things for the clients documented well, and are the NPS documented well. But following that, you got to make sure you're measuring your return on investment for your marketing initiatives. So now we go for top funnel. Are you measuring where your money is being spent and how many people are coming in at an absolute basis? And then you're measuring ROI on a per employee basis. So, is each employee at least paying their way and a margin that you're comfortable with? For associates that are new grads, that margin might be smaller than what you expect out of a senior, but you've got to set up your margin analysis across the different types of clinicians that you've got in your practice, whether or not you need to make a 50% margin on seniors and a 35% margin on associates. It's really, really important to understand how many billable hours you need out of each over the course of 6 to 12 months. Following that, if you're setting, like, even before you're setting up your practice, will your business be able to bill enough money with the amount of beds that you have in your business to at least make sure that the rent isn't a disproportionately large amount of your turnover? So if 2 beds is all that you've got, and if you've got those full, if your rent's going to be 30% of your total margin, then you know that everything is never going to work from there. Now, my golden rule is that you want to get rent down to around about 5% over a long term for how much rent contribution is on the overall cost compared to when it's fully booked. 10% is a reasonable sweet spot. But so, you check your margins on your employees, you check your margins, including all overheads. You're trying to drive a 15-ish%, 15 up 20% profit margin, above and beyond your own wage as an owner. And, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. But again, it's all built from the base up. It's the clinical care at the end of the day. It's the customer service at the end of the day. We operate in partial discretionary spending. Like there's a part of our clients that's discretionary, and there's a part of our clients that is not discretionary. Workers' comp, NDIS, etc., where it's funded by other sources. So you've got to make sure that you're hitting both customer service, clinical outcomes, and then being prudent with the rest of it.
Thanks for sharing that golden information. Really, really useful. And I keep hearing when I do these interviews, it's always rent and wages, rent,
Yeah.
wages, consistent.
Well, with wages, Barry, look now, they're talking about
Yeah.
the minimum wage for,
Yep.
healthcare support services going up by, maybe 20% on some of the tiers, the hierarchies, level 1 through level 8. And it's so vital for people to understand what the flow on impact of that is. Workers' comp isn't going to adjust their prices by 20%. DVA is not going to do it by 20%. Private you can control. You can control your private fees. If I asked everybody that was watching this to raise your fees by 20%, in order to cover your offset your increase in your fair work, raise, like most of your viewers probably shit themselves, the old classic physio clinic used to print up their rate increases like 3 weeks before they did it, and they would still have it 4 weeks after. It would be like McDonald's giving everybody the heads up that their Big Mac meals are increasing. It's trying to decouple the financial emotions from the clinic owner to what they're doing in practice. Most of the time when you raise your fees, there is very minimal pushback for a smaller period of time than you think. But again, you can only raise your fees on the discretionary spending part, right? And so if you're not measuring these things, you don't know how much you're exposed. If you've got a majority workers' comp in your clinic and wages go up, you're really exposed. If you've got a majority of Medicare and you're not charging a gap, you're really exposed. If you've got a huge amount of DBA, you're really exposed because you can't move the needle on those, and the government's not going to come to the party. So it's about knowing where your exposure is at and how you can adjust.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I love how you put it very eloquently. I love your big picture type of perspective on it. You see it as a CEO now, from a macro perspective, the bird's eye view, which
and trying to remember, as a business owner, when you're getting people doing the work for you each and every day, remembering what that actually means when they're with a client. So if you do raise your fees, train staff really well with the script. Don't leave them exposed in terms of the support that they have. Just get on the front foot with training and communication with your staff, break down every barrier about their nervousness with some of these things as well. Because, at the end of the day, they're your advocates and they're the people that are doing the work that, that makes your life fulfilling.
Absolutely. I think I love what you said, that like over communicate like to them about how this is important. I mean, my physios still shit themselves selling TheraBand.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? To their patients.
Yeah, $5.
$5.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's still today. And
Yeah.
I can deeply relate to that,
Yeah.
Jono. Okay, lastly, while we've got you, what is a lesson that you've learned running a successful allied health group, massive one, that you haven't seen on social media posted by, coaches, etc., that's maybe not so popular to view, but is the truth, Johnny, before we wrap up?
I think I'll say it's my truth. Your most valuable asset is the capacity that your people have. So the person that is quietest in your practice is actually your most valuable asset, not your biggest liability, especially if you back yourself to fill them in. Don't expect them to do it on their own. Like if you've got someone that is only half as booked as what you want them to be, look at the opportunity of that, not the stress of them being half filled. So if they need more work, back yourself to go and fill them up. If they need more work, back yourself to get those referrals. If they need more work, back yourself to do the marketing that brings it in. If they're not returning their clients enough because, maybe they are lacking the confidence, back yourself to be an incredible motivator of people to, make sure they believe in what they're doing. So knowing what those assets are, and again, employees are your biggest asset in a business. It's not your brand, it's not your location, it's the people that are executing on it. And the people with the greatest capacity are your biggest asset. Seth Godin was, one of the first people that, I really understood that. It's like, find an incredible person, hire them first and fill them up later. You'll find work for an incredible person to do. So, your assets are to be cherished. They're never to be abused. Then you don't whip them. And we've got a saying here at Physio Inq, if the horse is tired, get off the horse and carry the horse. If your employees are tired, do the heavy lifting, carry them, carry them for as long as they need to be carried. Now, first of all, you get off the horse and walk next to the horse, and next you throw the horse on your shoulders. And, so if those assets are struggling, make sure that, you lead by example and that you've always got their back, and they'll pay you back for it.
Absolutely love it, mate. True leader.
Mate,
Anyway,
you've got a fascinating story with CliniScribe at the moment.
yeah.
Hopefully you're sharing that from
Yeah,
the
we will.
rooftops. What a tough grind.
Yeah, it is an absolute grind, but I absolutely love it because it needs to be done.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, thanks so much for your time, Jono. I'm gonna snip that up and share that through social media, ironically. But fantastic insights there from someone who's actually made it, I'd say, by definition.
Well, it's funny,
Well,
isn't it? Like it's one of those things. I don't consider that yet. I'll let you
yeah, I
know
know.
when I ever do. But
Yeah,
like I can understand just the size of our business that it looks like we made it, but I don't know if there ever is a making it. I don't.
no,
There's probably not. And as an industry, I hope we all make it in that we're able to come together and figure out how we can work with government and legislators and the private healthcare market to teach them, what the value is of what we all do, because it is quite profound what we've been, tasked with doing, which is empowering people to live better lives.
love it, love it. Yeah, I mean, as you said before, you're only at 10 to 20% of where you want to be at 400 practitioners. So all the best, Jono. I'm sure
Thank
we'll
you,
talk
mate.
again.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.